Welcome to ALAQA, a podcast about the relationships shaping systems, capital, and the climate transition. Today, I'm joined by Tess Dury, Director of Impact and ESG at Extentia, a deep tech climate fund known for not shying away from hardware tech, as well as first-of-a-kind industrial investments. At Extentia, Tess works with investors in climate startups to support them in the difficult journey of both designing and delivering sustainable growth that is part of the solution, not the problem. Today's episode is honestly quite surprising for me because not only did we explore the usual personal journey into sustainability and impact, but Tess managed to uncover so many difficult and interesting questions around colonial history and how it should be interconnected with a general systems approach, which I found particularly fascinating. And she did not shy away also from approaching power and relationships in venture capital. Hello, Tess.
Hi, Min.
I'm so happy to welcome you on ALAQA.
Thank you for having me here.
Yes, it's funny, when you accepted to join me for this conversation, you were both excited and surprised. And I really loved the humility behind this reaction. And I think it's one of the striking features that comes to my mind whenever I think of you. This combo of excitement and brightness and humility at the same time. So I'm very excited for the conversation to come.
Yeah, I was very honored to be asked to be a part of this.
Yay. So first off, the first part of the conversation on the ALAQA's podcast is usually about your story, where you come from, and your path, whether personal or professional, and how it brought you to the job that you are doing right now. So if you can tell us a bit more about what you do.
Yeah, maybe start off where I am now. I am Director of Impact and ESG for Extantia. Extantia is a VC fund, early stage investments. We're based in Berlin, Germany, and we focus on climate tech companies, both hardware and software, with a growing range of impactful companies that we're trying to help make successful, ranging from decarbonization, which was also our original focus. And now we're looking into resilience, adaptation, circularity, all of these important topics, obviously, when we think about tackling the climate crisis.
And how did you end up there?
How did I get here? Yes. It's definitely a personal and professional story intertwined. For me, the two don't separate. I bring a lot of myself to my role, and my personal life definitely influences where I am today. So I was born to Belgian parents, but I grew up in Portugal. And I've always been fascinated by history, politics, human relationships, how they shape societies, and how we are interacting with each other. And also then, obviously, the crises that we find ourselves in, the multi-crises. I found myself a decade ago in London after my master's studies, and I was quite unhappy in a job I wasn't really enjoying. And unfortunately also a lifestyle, which I love London. London is a great city, but it was quite stressful. And I found myself craving different inputs in life, not just from my job, but also from people around me and paths that I knew it wasn't just this one path that was laid ahead of me from my perspective where I was in London. So I ended up having a good friend from my master's who kept telling me how amazing Berlin was, and she convinced me to move here. I found a job in this thing called ESG, which no one knew what it was a decade ago. It was very niche. Even I was like, oh, it's interesting. They need a Portuguese speaker, so I'll apply. But the personal reset was also to try and open up my world a bit more, to meet new and different people from all walks of life. And Berlin is the perfect city for that, I feel. So I got very lucky in that I found a place where I feel at home. I fulfilled the needs that I had from the place where I'm living. And the professional reset also came from wanting also more work with more positive impact on the world. That's something that I've always wanted to have and hadn't at that point yet found. Entering ESG even a decade ago, I like this idea of shining a light on irresponsible businesses, on how money flows, unethical capital flows, and doing best to uncover that. Here now, I love it. It's flipped. So I was working for an ESG data company there where we would do ESG research on ESG risk factors. And now it's the opposite. I'm working to try and prevent those ESG incidents from happening by starting very early with our companies at an early stage and integrating responsible business practices in the companies that we invest in. And then obviously impact comes in, and in this industry there are different concepts but often under the same umbrella. And I've learned a lot about how to measure impact, how to report on impact, and also how to look at impact from a very holistic perspective. And so it's been a lot of learning. VC is interesting and fast-paced, and I think we can explore some quite interesting tensions in the rest of this conversation.
Definitely. The topic of ALAQA and the focus is about relationships. So can you tell us what relationship or perhaps turning point shaped how you think about capital and systems today?
I would say my own relationship with what I would call my colonial history is a huge factor. Surprise?
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, Belgium, Portugal, those are two very important part of my identity. Actually, both my parents were born in the Belgian Congo. So that's really a part of my family history. And having grown up with that, with the artifacts in my grandparents' house, in the conversations about what they used to do, and then the discussions with my father on the dinner table growing up, I would say as like a socially minded, politically active teenager, was always very interesting. It definitely shaped who I am now. And I think it gave me this hunger and this thirst for understanding how systems have been created and also how they are perpetuated and kept, and also how these sort of histories linger, still play a role today. I think looking at capital flows, that's seeing it really from all of these different perspectives, not just from the bubble where I am now. I think it definitely from ESG, if we're thinking about the climate transition, which is obviously our bread and butter here at Extantia, looking at things like critical materials that we need for the electrification and their supply chains and what it means to be an extractive industry. And if there's even a way to do that responsibly, are there trade-offs? What can the trade-offs look like? Is there a lesser evil? If that concept, even lesser of two evils, let's say. So that relationship to my own personal history has made me see that no system exists in isolation. And I think it really helps me, being good at my job, to really try and unpuzzle all of that. And also knowing very much that the people who are most impacted negatively are often nowhere near the spaces in which these decisions are being made, and trying to maybe represent that in some way.
I hope that our listeners heard the surprise in my voice, because I didn't know that part of your personal history, and I'm really honored that you shared this with me and with us. If I may build up on this question, how do you leverage this awareness and this deep understanding of what is really in the balance for so many other people than yourself and the people surrounding you, when you consider supporting your team, your investment team, or when you engage with fellow ESG or impact practitioners, or when you entertain conversations with the investors, whether family offices or institutional investors? How do you think it can be not just an anecdotal point, but something that informs and hopefully colors your perspectives and your inputs?
Yeah, I think, it's definitely still a work in progress.
No, I'm sure, but I'm
How to
curious.
put this all together. And there is a tension in this industry also, knowing that us as investors, we are gatekeepers of capital. Also, we make the decisions about which startups get funded by us, of course, but still. And I'd like to think that by being aware and attuned to how these systems all work together, that I do try and ask the right questions, or try to maybe point the attention to factors that are not often considered. So who is paying for this ultimately? Where is it coming from? Is it perpetuating some sort of inequality? Where do we need to pay attention to? And not all risks can be eliminated, but at least some can be mitigated. And that's what I feel like my contribution is. So I would say often I do try and leverage this sort of shining a spotlight on certain topics. Whether it's successful or not, it's sometimes hard to tell at this point, but I think that's my role.
And do you feel there's an appetite on the founder side, for instance, when it comes to you opening the scope and the perimeter of the conversation or the field of topics that are discussed during their conversations with you beyond the, okay, let me check your metrics or let me check your decarbonization effect at scale? Or do you feel there's an appetite or is it seen as a source of distraction? I wonder, especially in your particular segment of deep tech and very tech intensive type of ventures.
I feel very lucky with the types of companies that we invest into because I do think that just by their impact intentionality that they have built in from wanting to create a company that is alleviating some form of the climate crisis. So whether that's a new form of power generation or whether it's a new type of material that is not so carbon intensive or whether it's recycling plastics. Of course, to some varying different degrees, but I do think that almost all of our founders have that intentionality and are very open to this conversation that I bring to them. In fact, it's almost one of the only red flags that I will ever raise if I can tell in due diligence that founders are not interested in this part at all. There is, of course, then the whole process because we do have to do a lot of work with, which is a lot of ESG is still, unfortunately, tick boxing exercises. And I try as much as possible to filter that out in order to do really value adding practical work with the companies. But I think one of the ways in which I try and do that better, which I think only became more clear to me a few years in, was to really build the relationships with those founders so that there is more of this really balanced eye-to-eye type of interaction and relationship with each other rather than me just saying, hey, you need to now report on X, Y, and Z or give me these data points and then sort of disappear because that's all I need from them to check my boxes and then move on. So I think that's really something that I've been valuing more and more in being able to achieve then this type of relationship where I can say, hey, have you thought about this? And they're actually open and willing to listen.
So you said that you had a different role before Extantia already in the ESG and sustainability space. And now you are in a position where you are not directly part of the investment team. You support the investment team, but you're not an investor per se. Am I correct? Yes?
Correct, yeah.
If you compare your previous job to this one and the relationship dynamics between the LPs, the investment team, yourself, the founders, what did it teach you about power or interdependence? And perhaps also, how do you solve the tensions that you were mentioning?
There's definitely a lot of power dynamics. What I've realized in this role, in contrast to my previous role, so working previously for an ESG service provider, I felt like within that team, we were all oriented to the same goal. While here at Extantia, of course, we're all oriented to the same goal. We have the same mission. We work for the same company. My role is different. And my role is almost to be that stone in someone's shoe. The investment team might be really excited about a deal, and I have to ask some difficult questions. And I think what I've learned about the interdependence is if I show up in a certain way, and of course, I have my own politics, my colleagues know me very well. I often get said that I'm very passionate about ESG, that it's in me, deep in me. And of course, that comes out in these moments. But to show up in a way that's also respectful of where they're coming from, acknowledging that they have a job to do, their job to do, which is to secure a deal and get our returns for our LPs, which also is, of course, part of my role. But to make sure I show up in that way, saying, I know that you have a job to do, and this is the job that I have to do. Can we meet in the middle, figure it out together? For me, I think is the most valuable way to do that. It's the same with founders. So if I show up to them in a value-adding way, then they are going to be much more willing to show up for me when I need them for, let's say, reporting, which is something that is very burdensome for them. It requires a bit of extra effort. It requires their time, which is very limited. But if I have shown up previously in a way that's helpful and valuable to them in a respectful way, then they will do the same for me. So it's a lot about this relationship building and trust.
Okay, excellent. Coming back to the lessons and the challenges that not always prove successful, unfortunately, what's one challenge that you faced navigating these tensions and the complexity of the world we live in, huh? And how did you work it through? So it can be perhaps a discussion on the carbon tunnel, the infamous carbon tunnel. It can be a discussion around a personal style of a founder or a founding team that may have felt a bit off to you for XYZ reasons, and that based on the strategy and the vision, the investment team said, oh, we're great. We absolutely want to invest. This type of seeing one reality from all sorts of angles. And the difficulty is that you can't just split in the middle because that's not how life works. So
Yeah.
what can you tell us about one challenge you faced navigating complexity?
There's a lot of these examples. I think one thing that I have found, or one challenge, for example, is I do struggle a bit when I bring my whole self to work. That also comes with the perception that I have certain politics, I have a very strong dedication to the environment and all aspects of it, circularity, biodiversity, also not harming communities. And in a fast-paced investment world like VC, that's sometimes almost too much to be thinking about if you want to move forward quickly. And I think one way that I've learned is to really prioritize, narrow down and prioritize to try and stay objective, because sometimes my personal opinion is not actually what maybe the best recommendation is to go forward, even from my position. And one example I would say is we had a company that actually from an impact perspective was incredible. It was carbon capture and storage, and specifically point source capture. And in the early stages of their development, they had mostly clients in the oil and gas sector in their pipeline. And this, for me, was also for the fund and in general, was quite a difficult tension to hold, because we saw the potential impact of the company, but also knowing that it's almost working with the devil, let's say, which we shouldn't call it that. We need everyone on board with the transition, but it's a very difficult thing for a climate fund to accept or to swallow. In that case, I think, and it was a good way forward, we actually went to our investors, so to our LPs, and we brought them into the conversation. And I think that's a way in which you can bring more stakeholders and more perspectives into a complex situation, but they also have maybe access to other information or other approaches which they could share. And that then came up with a clear answer also for us. And it helped us clear up some of the complete, oh, okay, but if we do this, the impact will be great, but actually the beginning impact is not so great. And yeah, it was a difficult time. Also, there were very much differing opinions within our team, but we then sought extra help. And ultimately, then it also speaks to our responsibilities to our stakeholders, and it's their money that we're investing. So we need to also check in with them. And it wasn't so much as outsourcing the decision. It was more like we need more voices to help us figure this complex situation out.
Interesting. And when you say stakeholders, because in this case it's clients, when it comes to LPs, do you sometimes engage with other types of stakeholders to enrich the ethical conversation or the different dimensions of a difficult conversation?
Yeah, I often check in with my peers. So the people in other funds who are in my position or similar positions, I use my network a lot to help with these complex situations. And before Extantia, I had never worked in VC before. So it's also a lot of navigating what this means and what the processes could look like. It's been 3 years now with Extantia, and a lot of these processes did not exist at all, even in the industry, before this new, let's say, this group of people who are in my position came into our position. So a lot of it is really talking to each other and saying, hey, I think I should do this. What do you think? Do you agree? So that's definitely also a group of stakeholders, I would say, that I tap into quite often. And I also try and broaden outside of this bubble, this VC bubble, because I do think there is a little bit of an echo chamber here. And there I tap into my friends. I have a friend who works for the German Ministry of Environment, and I have friends who do very different jobs actually to what I do. And there I often also just bounce some ideas off of. And it helps a lot with these different perspectives.
I have a question for you on this third part around the tensions and the lessons and let's look forward to what can be done together. I understand that you were initially very focused on ESG at Extantia, and you gradually extended the width and the depth and the layers of what you're looking at. Can you tell us a bit more how you managed to progressively build this new chapter and expand your role in a way that apparently feels more aligned and more fulfilling for you and for the vision you have for your company?
I came into this role thinking, oh, I have a 7-year background in ESG. I can do this. But then coming into a completely different industry where you have to learn everything from scratch was quite a humbling experience. So even the way in which ESG is sort of put into action is very different here with startups than it is in where I was looking at ESG and working with ESG before, which is big corporates and bigger companies and much more mature companies. And I think that experience, even though it was, I will happily admit, a huge struggle in the beginning, a big imposter syndrome and thinking, what am I doing? How can I be telling or help telling companies what they should be doing? I've never run a company myself. Even with ESG experience, it's so different. But that really showed me that it's really the questions you're asking and what you're educating yourself with then as you go along. And VC is great because you get dropped into the deep end and then you have to figure it out. So that's been a great lesson from my first years in just ESG and expanding into impact and having also the great supportive ecosystem here at Extantia. So we have also a head of carbon math, and he does a lot of the LCA style work, which I don't have experience with, or I don't have the theoretical knowledge for that. But being able to build also my sort of impact knowledge with him directly, and then also here the partners who've been very supportive of me learning on the job. And then being curious about it, I think, is the biggest thing. But it definitely, there's a lot of people I admire who are in positions like mine in other funds. And I think one person once said to me, Tess, it's not rocket science, because I think I was overthinking it a bit too much. So that's been a great lesson also to just put yourself forward, just try. It's not rocket science. Also, a friend was recently making a bit of fun of me saying, whose lives are you saving? Are you a doctor? Are you in the ER? And don't stress out so much. Doesn't mean not taking it seriously, obviously, but it also means having a bit of a, okay, I'm going to try this. And if it fails or if it's wrong, then we try again. And that approach has really helped with embracing the unknown with certain parts of this role. I do think that people in climate tech investments are forging a bit of a path. We don't have many examples. It's not a very regulated industry at the measuring impact and how to do that, especially for startups. So a lot of it is really just trying to do the thing that makes the most sense to you and see how it goes. And if you need to change along the way, then you have to adapt.
It's funny you say that people told you, oh, it's not rocket science, because the minute you consider the systems you're trying to affect as a climate tech startup in all their complexity, it can be overwhelming. And getting to a point where you say, hey, let's try and see what happens, can take you back to a very linear and siloed approach, which is exactly the opposite of anyone who wants to apply or have a framework, let's say, more inspired by systems. It can be very frustrating and overwhelming for one person. So I wonder how you hold space for this tension of, it's not only a question of imposter syndrome or not knowing what to do, but I feel it's also two very different approaches to one given problem. One person seeing or trying to grasp all the complexity, and the other one saying, okay, let's do this and we'll see how it goes, which is part of the criticism that a lot of people have against climate tech. So how do you hold space for this tension?
I think that's absolutely spot on. I think there's moments in which to look at it. I mean, I think we always have to have a systems perspective for sure. But in moments where, for example, we're trying to create a new, let's say, a pre-investment impact assessment framework, which is something I've just done here at Extantia, a new one with a broader lens where we are looking more in a systems direction. So without this, we were very focused on carbon reduction as our only impact metric. And now we've broadened it also to include other impact pathways that are important for the climate transition. But while broadening, the tension is to find systems to put in place, let's say for us internally, how do we consider an investment now to be impactful enough or not impactful enough, which can work also within our processes. And this is often the case that we have a deal on the table and it has to go relatively quickly, or we need to make this decision relatively quickly. And so I do think that there's moments where you hold all of the complexity and you try and find a way through it and you make space for this complexity. But I think there's also times where you have to just say, okay, this is the way we're going forward. It's not to say ignoring the complexity, but it is, we have to find practical ways in which to push the mission forward. So in this case, in creating this pre-investment framework, it has to be workable. It has to be flexible enough that we can make space for the investments that we think are impactful enough. So to have a framework that supports our vision and to try it out. I'm definitely an overthinker, so it takes someone else, mostly my boss, to say, hey, this is enough. Let's try it out. If it doesn't work, we go back to the drawing board, we tweak it, we change it, and then we put it out there again. So that's a big lesson for me. I tend to be more on the holding space for all the complexity, but it does sometimes paralyze me as well.
Thank you, Tess. I would be curious if you managed to run through your past investments through this pre-investment framework to see how they would have qualified or not. That would be a very interesting exercise.
It's on the agenda for sure. It's on my to-do list.
Okay, cool. Okay, now to the next section, which we call Contrarian Thoughts. Okay? So I would like you to leave a statement that will be commented by further guests, that will create a chain and promote conversations also with the audience. So, for instance, something that people should do less, or a hot take, or the hill that you are willing to keep fighting for, or something that people keep on telling you, oh, I never heard this before, or oh, they strongly disagree with you and you don't give up. This is the kind of thought that we would like you to share with us, if you will.
I also think this is a great question. So I would say one of the main things that we're hearing, especially now in Europe and with the funding gap for climate solutions, climate tech, is that we need more capital.
Yes.
And my hot take is we don't just need more capital, we do also need less extractive capital. So the capital needs to be different than what we've done before. I think if money flows into projects that exploit workers, communities, or ecosystems, we might be solving one part of the climate crisis, but we're creating many more problems at the same time. And potentially then also this idea of green growth, we might just be rebranding a version of extraction or even neocolonialism that has not served us in the past. And I think we need to look at that for the future. So anything built on extractive models, I mentioned rare earths, mining, lithium, anything with land grabs, exploration, drilling, hydrogen is a hot topic right now. If we repeat the same extractive and unjust dynamics that have us to this point in the first place, then I don't think we're on the right path.
So what is a non-extractive capital?
I think it's capital that ensures that these considerations are designed in from the start. And that's where we come in as early stage investors. I think it's super important that we are asking these questions to the companies. If they're creating a product, what is the end of life design for that product? Is it designed in? Is it just going to be wasted resources? You can't recycle it. Look at the problems we have with batteries right now. If those questions and this sort of reuse or recyclability was thought into the design, we'd be in a different place right now. So this idea also of fairness, who are we building the solutions for and how far will it reach in solving these problems? And it's about, for me, non-extractive capital also builds shared values, durable systems to create a stronger and more sustainable transition rather than just creating another system where we are facing the same problems. Backlash, inequality, growing inequality, political instability. I think all of these things should, be considered more.
Okay. And so for your fellow GPs, what advice would you give them to be things they should be mindful of when taking LP capital to make sure it's not an extractive capital because it's a chain?
Oh, that's a good question. I have not thought about that. How we as GPs could ask the questions to our LPs to make them think that. I will take that one home.
Okay, next section, your go-to person, Tess. So since we're talking about relationships, it would be nice to have a shout out moment. Your go-to person when thinking about changing the system. So who would that be?
I thought a lot about who my go-to person would be for this shout out, and I could not land on one person.
Okay.
So I have to say it's the people with all the different experiences that I surround myself with. I have people who are in very regular tech jobs, but actually in their private life, they're activists, whether climate or political or whatever. I have a friend who's an anti-racism workshop leader. So he really runs these workshops for a living, and it's a perspective that is very valuable to me. I have friends who are artists, architects, my friend in the climate ministry, my partner, she's actually a founder, but she, for 10 years, has had a picture framing company. So working with her hands, and in German, there's a word, the word is Handwerker. And through her, I've met a lot more of those types of people. And that's where this climate tech VC bubble is very much, we are very much the same types of people, not always, but we're all knowledge workers and all have degrees in certain areas. And I think for me, really, when I talk about changing the world or improving the world, it's people who have different perspectives than my own that I love debating these things with. Like I said, the personal and the professional, I moved to Berlin also to have these different perspectives in my life, because that was missing a bit from the knowledge worker bubble that I was in London. If I can just add one more thing to that, I think one of the perspectives that I've lacked in my life, but that I'm really craving now, and especially with the world feeling a little difficult at this moment in time, is also people who are more in touch with their spirituality than I have been with mine, and helping me on that path, opening those doors for me, asking questions and giving resources. And that, for example, is also something that I very much appreciate about my partner, and that she has a very strong spiritual practice, and it helps me a lot developing my own. And I think those things, and I'm also working with a coach these days, and she's also shown me that I have a very high understanding that we're all related from a humanity perspective, and that I'd never thought of that as a strength. And I think because it's always or often in a business setting, is more seen as a certain naivete or just something idealistic. And I think that I'm exploring also what that means, my personal and my professional persona, to bring those things together in more holistic ways.
If being connected to others is being naive, I'm happy to be naive.
Yeah, me too.
I disagree with the first part of the conversation, but still, I'm fine with naive if that's what naive means. Now is the time for the flash round, okay? So quick questions, quick answers. Ready?
Yes.
Okay. First question, a question you wish more investors would ask.
Who benefits and who pays for the tech that we are financing?
Crystal clear, sharp, love it. Second, one book, music, or practice that helps you to hold the complexity.
A book is difficult, but a writer that helps me hold a lot of complexity is Audre Lorde. She's one of my favorite writers. She brings the political in with the personal, and very clearly and very astutely can explain how also your life is impacted by the political, but your life can impact the political as well, and the decisions that you make, and how you stand for your values, and how you show up in the world with others.
Great reference. Thank you. Third question, a system you'd love to see more of or more disruption in. So either you want it to expand or you would like it to be more disrupted.
Yeah, I think supply chains for critical materials is really going to be one of these turning points. And I would love to see more disruption in it, in making it more sustainable. So not just in where to mine them and AI applications for how to find more of them and then mine them out of the ground, but more how to reuse them, how to recycle, how to use alternative materials in less extractive ways. I'd love more disruption there.
Okay. And fourth and last question, what gives you hope in the capital/climate space right now?
I really honestly and truly say conversations like this.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm honored.
No, but really, Iman, I really mean it, because I think often these things are left out of the conversation or unsaid, and I think in the fast pace of this industry, we don't take the time for these types of reflections. And I would really like to see more of that.
It's a blessing to have this type of discussions, to be honest, because, and we spoke about it before the podcast, Tess, I have so many of these conversations behind closed doors, so many. And I think more and more people need to see and need to hear that their voice and not their standard, neutral, a bit dry voice, but all the richness and the depth of their voice matters to others in ways that they cannot imagine. So thank you. Thank you for the support. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to ALAQA. If this conversation sparked something for you, share it, leave a review, and subscribe for more dialogues at the intersection of capital, systems, and transformation.